Today I want to talk to you guys about some of the core infrastructure that exists on the farm, some of the big ticket items and what you might look to spend when you're starting out. So a lot of this is going to be referenced from my book. If you have my book, you can check out page 139 in it, and I have a more comprehensive list on there. We won't look at all of those things in detail. We'll kind of take broad strokes of what are some of the major ticket items and some of the categories of items that you need to start a farm. So let's start right where I'm standing. Farm is in a bit of, it's not what it looks like normally because most of our stuff is in the greenhouse right now, and we'll go look at that stuff in a minute. But one of the major ticket items you're going to start with on a farm is some kind of soil working machinery. This is a BCS 739, and when I first started, I had a older version of a BCS. I think it was a 837 or something like that. It was an old one. It was probably 20 years old, but these machines are really built to last. I know people that have had a BCS from the time like their dad gave it to them. So if you treat them well and you maintain them, they can last a lifetime. The reason a soil working piece of equipment is so important is for prepping your farm and shaping your beds and just doing general bed prep throughout the season. Now, I have changed my opinion a little bit over the years on whether a farm needs to have this thing to start with. And I think if you're a farm that's like a half acre or less, you might not necessarily need to own a BCS to start. You can probably rent one to do your initial prep, get all your beds prepped, and work in your ground and all that. Check out my video Lawn to Farm up here where I've talked about this before. But you might not need to own it to start if you're at the right size. If you're bigger than a half acre, it's good to have a piece of have this equipment for yourself. However, it's something that you can share with another farm perhaps, and run it like a co-op type thing. I've seen farmers that do this. However, I have one because I want to have one. I like to have it. I like to have my own equipment, so that's important to me, but it might not be for others. And there's a piece of equipment I'll show you when we go look at our tools that it's called a tilther, and you can use it. Actually, I'll just show it to you right here. I've shown this in previous videos before. Tilther. This is made by Johnny's Selected Seeds, and it is an electric powered, very shallow depth tiller, basically, that does a lot of the bed prep that this would do, and it allows you to do low till or no till, and but you can't do plot prep with that tool. You can't start a new farm and go and grind up a bunch of grass with that tool. You need a heavy piece of machinery like a walk-behind tractor or even a larger tractor to do that. So BCS is going to be one of your biggest purchases on a farm. To buy these new or starting at around $5,000. To get other implements for them, you can spend upwards to $10,000. But when I started, I had a used BCS. I got it for $1,000 and it had 3 implements. So if you spend the time to look for them, you can find bargains. They're just not that easy because people know the value of them, and their resale value is often not as low as, say, a used car. So that's a BCS. I'm going to show you right here. This is another piece of important equipment. Quick cut greens harvester. I've reviewed this before. Check the link above if you want to see my review of this piece of equipment. I would not start a farm without this tool. This is a $500 tool. I wouldn't start a farm without this thing. If you're going to be doing greens on any level of commercial scale, I wouldn't even consider not having a quick cut greens harvester. It's that important of a piece of equipment. It saves us, depending on certain years, I mean, I've been using this for 3 years now, anywhere between 100 and 200 hours of labor a year. It's a major time saver, and it's a major back saver. So quick cut greens harvester is an awesome tool. So the next big purchase you're going to have on a farm is some kind of transportation vehicle. This is our new, well, I bought it last year, but it's our new delivery van. It's a Ram ProMaster City. It's locked right now, but it's just a basic small cargo van. I like it. It's actually the most perfect farm vehicle we've had because I can use it for, I can even move soil in it. We just have to fill it into containers and load it, but it's mainly a delivery van, and it's done everything that we need. When I started, everything I did was with bikes, custom built trailers and bikes, so we were pedal powered. We still use that equipment today. We have utility bikes. So I started that way. I didn't even have, these ones have electric assists. I didn't have that when I started, but I got that later on in the years. So my delivery vehicle setup when I started was very, very inexpensive, because it was just a bike and a custom built trailer. I think all together that might have been worth $1,000. This vehicle I bought new, so it's obviously worth more, but you can start cheap. In the past I used these Daihatsu little mini trucks, and those worked good for a while, but we're starting to deliver more to customers that are further away, and so those trucks weren't very good for going on the highway. But vehicle purchase is going to be a major one, and you don't necessarily have to have a specialty vehicle to start. You can use your minivan or a hatchback, or, you know, for a small farm, you don't have to have a huge vehicle, so you can kind of double purpose your personal vehicle with a farm vehicle if your farm's small enough, you know. But if you're doing enough production where you really need a lot of volume in the vehicle for delivering, you're going to need a larger vehicle. So certainly not critical to starting a farm, but pretty important is season extension. I've got many videos on season extension, you can check those out. Starting with poly low tunnels is the most inexpensive way to extend your season, because these can have the same effect as a greenhouse, but, you know, about 1/10 of the cost. So once you start producing more, you can go into a traditional high tunnel, but you're also going to need, and it's a pretty important thing to start with, is a nursery. Obviously my nursery has been upgraded since I started, but I started with a 200 square foot nursery on a little concrete pad made with PVC. I spent about $500 to build it. So it's relatively an inexpensive thing to start with. Your next major ticket item is some kind of commercial refrigeration. And I've talked about this many times in the past, but I would never recommend starting a commercial farm, no matter the scale, without commercial refrigeration. The main reason for it is that it allows you to put your stuff in containers into the cooler to get the field heat off. So I've done videos on that in the past, check that out, just search field heat. But walk-in cooler, there's different types you can get, but this is a very, very important piece of equipment, and allows us to stagger out our harvest period. It keeps our produce longer, so it extends the marketing period. There is a whole bunch of reasons why you need a walk-in cooler. And again, I've talked about these many times in the past. Just search walk-in cooler in my videos and you'll find stuff. But that's a major ticket item. This is the first walk-in cooler I ever bought. I spent $1,000 for it, which was cheap. And so that's a big ticket item. You know, you can spend to the sky's the limits, but you can repurpose old restaurant coolers with a CoolBot system and an air conditioner for pretty inexpensive. You can even spend less than $1,000, but that's going to be one of your major purchases to start. So if you're doing some kind of nursery on your farm, I'm in my nursery right now, it's warm in here. Obviously more of an expensive nursery than somebody would spend to start with. But this is what's great about starting cheap, is that once you get cash flow going, you recapitalize on your farm and you upgrade and you spend more as you go, but you don't need to start with all the fancy stuff. Basic nursery supplies, planting flats, you know, soil flats, these are 200 cell flats, soil for mixing. You know, you can expect to spend a few $100s on equipment like this when you're starting. And like I said, I spent $500 on my nursery when I started. So if you're going to have a nursery, this stuff is pretty necessary, but there are really inexpensive ways to start with it. In my book, I detail more about those things there as well. So just moving on to packing equipment, digital scales, things like this. Bags, we use, these are gusseted bags. Somebody had asked about these in the past. 4-pound bags, they're 5 inches by 3 inches by 11.5 inches. So that's what we pack our greens into that go to grocery stores and the farmer's market when we sold at the farmer's market. You know, just different types of scales, different types of bags. You know, these are bags on a roll. These are bigger bags, so that would be for packing 2-pound case lot stuff for restaurants and just some different types of customers there. This is a bag sealer. I've talked about this in previous videos. That just makes a a twist tie on the bag, and it saves about 2 or 3 seconds per bag, which really adds up when you do a lot of packing. So that's kind of your basic packing infrastructure. Moving on, we've got a washing table. Again, I've talked about this specifically in previous videos, but you can build one of these for a couple $100. So that's where we wash vegetables on. We wash our root vegetables there. Anything that involves wet work and water is done here because we have a pool liner down here, and the water goes into a sort of a sub tank that gets pumped off the property onto our perennial bushes. But this is the greens bubbler here. It's taken apart right now because we cleaned it out last night, but that's where we wash our greens, and I've done videos on that before. You can build those for probably about a few $100s. So that's the necessary piece of equipment for washing and or for washing our greens. Next we have our greens spinner. This is our salad spinner. This is a custom build. It's a modified washing machine. So right now our greens go in these types of bags. They go in the machine. It spins them dry, and we're going to be changing how that's done shortly as well, but we're still doing it in the bags. And then once the greens come out of there, they go on our drying screen, and this gets any residual standing water off the greens. I've done videos on this before, and again, all this stuff is in the book. So that is basically all of our packing and post-harvest infrastructure. So a post-harvest area is a really important area that you need to have set up on your farm. And just like the transportation vehicle, the soil working machine, and the walk-in cooler, your post-harvest area is very important. It needs to be sheltered, it needs to be not too exposed to the sun, and if you're doing work in the winter, it needs to be warm. But for most farms that are operating in like the 6 to 8 month period that is spring to fall, an open air area with basic shelter is good enough. You don't have to have something heated and obviously like this. But that's going to be one of your major purchases. In our greenhouse, in the winter, we're doing all of our work inside here. We have another station here that is for packing restaurant stuff. So back there with all the little bags and the little scales, that's where we pack for our grocery stores, and when we did farmers markets for our farmers markets. And then over here, this is like bigger bags, stuff like this. We use these lawn and garden bags. They're just, you know, lawn and garden bags that will line the inside of a box. If we're packing like 30 pounds of carrots for a restaurant or 10 pounds of greens in a box, those line the box. Again, we have these bulk bags. Larger type scale here too, because we're weighing larger amounts of stuff, you know, things by the pound, whereas the smaller scales we're using to measure things by the ounce. So just different types there. So we'll finish here. Just kind of some of the last stuff that is really important on the farm is your hand tools. And this isn't the most organized way I would suggest for having your tools, but I've got most of them off the ground, and that's important. But, you know, stirrup hose for weeding. We also use these as a way for turning over beds when we're doing no-till or low-till stuff. You can check that out in my previous videos. Rakes, I always have two different types of rakes. I like sort of just a classic garden rake, but then I've also got a landscape rake there. That's we use for bed prep. That's for leveling out the soil. You know, pitchforks, shovels. The tools that we use the most on the farm as far as soil working tools are stirrup hose and our landscape rake. Not this one, the one on the wall here, the landscape rake. We use that the most. And then pitchforks, we have a broad fork. Broad fork is a common tool. I did a video on a broad fork versus a pitchfork before. You can check that out. I prefer a pitchfork. Personally, I prefer the garden fork, they call it. I find it's faster, it's lighter, it's easy to move around. Because our farm is modular and we have multiple sites, we have to move tools around a lot. And so I generally prefer smaller, lightweight tools for that reason. And so the broad fork doesn't get used that often, but I know many other farmers swear by it, and I think it just comes down to personal preference. And then we've got our seeding tools. So the Jang seeder is my #1 seeding tool. I've done videos on that. And the Earthway seeder is a really good entry-level seeder. It's definitely not nearly as accurate or consistent as the Jang, but it's a great starting point because you can buy it for $100 and it will do pretty much everything you need to do. You can modify the Jang seeder, the Earthway seeder by simply I'll just take off the plate here. So the way an earthway works is there's a plate on there, and that picks up seeds. You can modify this by taping off, like say you want to go to a wider density planting. There's different types of plates for the earthway, but you can tape off every second hole or maybe every third hole, whatever, however you're going to do it, to get a lower density of seed dropping. And that's how you can modify it. There's other ways to do it if you just Google modifying the earthway seeder. I've seen people make blog posts on that before. All right, so that is all the core infrastructure of a farm. When I started, I spent $7,000 to get a used BCS walk-behind tractor, that walk-in cooler that you started, a couple scales, an earthway seeder, some basic tools. I was able to start on $7,000, and so the key here is you recapitalize as you go. Get what you need to start so that you can generate cash flow, and then from there incrementally grow your farm year after year. I see so many people make the mistake of spending too much off the bat, and they might discover a year that they don't like farming or that they're not very good at it, and then now they have all this stuff that they've spent too much money on and they have to sell. So it's always better to start with what you need with, get cash flow, learn, build your knowledge capital, and grow it from there. So hope you guys have found that helpful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button right now. Like and share these videos with your friends, and check out my website, theurbanfarmer.co, where you've got links to my workshops that I'm teaching. I'm teaching workshops on my farm this year, 3 of them, and tickets will become available for that in the next month. And yeah, you can make a donation to the show if you'd like to do so. It's very much appreciated and always welcome. That's at theurbanfarmer.co/support. All right, talk to you guys soon.